Now, drifting in the dark is an animal that may be older than it has any right to be, because when its body begins to fail, it does something no other animal on Earth is known to do this completely. It turns back time. It's called Turritopsis Dohrnii, and you could balance it on the tip of your finger. Its bell is smaller than your smallest fingernail, a translucent, ghostly thimble trailing fine tentacles. So unremarkable to look at that for most of history, nobody looked twice. And yet inside that speck of drifting jelly is arguably the most astonishing biological trick ever discovered. Faced with injury, starvation, or old age itself, this jellyfish can reverse its own life cycle, transforming its adult body back into its juvenile form, and then growing up all over again. Not healing, not hibernating, rewinding, an adult becoming young again, as many times as circumstances demand. Scientists call it, with a caution we'll unpack later, biological immortality. The rest of us know it by the name that stuck, the immortal jellyfish. Aging, the one current every living thing supposedly swims against, and this tiny, drifting ghost appears to have stepped out of the river entirely. This is Primal Mysteries. Let's meet the animal that switched off aging. First, to understand the miracle, you need to understand a jellyfish's ordinary life, because the trick lives inside the life cycle. A jellyfish like Turritopsis doesn't begin as a jellyfish. It begins as a larva that settles onto a hard surface, a rock, a shell, a dock, and grows into something called a polyp, a tiny, anchored, plant-like stalk, more like a miniature sea anemone than the creature we picture. The polyp is the childhood form. In time, it buds off free-swimming medusae, the bell and tentacles form we call a jellyfish. The medusa is the adult. It drifts, hunts tiny prey, matures, reproduces, and then, for every normal jellyfish on Earth, the story ends the way all stories end. The adult ages, weakens, and dies. Polyp, medusa, decline, death, the one-way street of life. The same street you and I are walking. Turritopsis Dohrnii read that map and found a road no one else has, a way to drive it in reverse. Here's what happens, and stay with this, because it's genuinely one of the strangest known events in biology. When an adult Turritopsis is badly injured, starving, or simply growing old, when death approaches by almost any door, it can trigger an escape sequence. The adult medusa sinks. Its bell folds in on itself. Its tentacles retract, and the animal collapses into what looks like a formless blob, settling onto the sea floor. By every appearance, a jellyfish dying. Except it isn't dying. Inside that blob, something extraordinary is underway. The jellyfish's cells are transforming, and this is the deep magic. Adult, specialized cells are converting into different kinds of cells through a rare process biologists call transdifferentiation. A muscle cell's descendants may serve new roles entirely. Committed grown-up cells return to flexible states and rebuild along a different blueprint. The blob reorganizes itself, and what rises from it is not a recovering adult. It's a polyp, the childhood form. The animal has physically reverted to its own juvenile stage, the biological equivalent of a butterfly collapsing into a chrysalis and crawling back out as a caterpillar, or, in the comparison every scientist reaches for, an old man folding into himself and unfolding as a toddler. And then, in time, that polyp does what polyps do. It buds off new medusae, genetically the same individual lineage, young again, drifting off to live another adulthood. Injury? Rewind. Starvation? Rewind. Old age arriving on schedule? Rewind. Under the right conditions, there is no known limit to how many times the cycle can repeat. One celebrated researcher in Japan has personally shepherded his tiny charges through rebirth after rebirth in the lab. a single lineage cycling from adult to youth over and over, like a phoenix the size of a lentil. That is why the nickname, for once, is barely an exaggeration. Barring misfortune, this animal does not appear to die of old age. It simply starts over. Now, the story of how we even know this, because the discovery itself is a lesson in how science actually works. Nobody set out to find an immortal animal. In the 1980s, the story goes, a young marine biology student collected some of these unremarkable jellyfish from the Mediterranean and kept them in a jar, and then noticed something impossible. The jar that should have held dying adults kept containing polyps, juveniles, where no juveniles should be, as though the animals were slipping backward when no one was watching. Careful study through the 1990s confirmed the unbelievable. The adults weren't leaving offspring and dying, they were becoming young again. And here's a detail that makes the story even better. While scientists were slowly realizing what this species could do, the species itself was quietly conquering the planet. Turritopsis has spread far beyond its original waters, riding, researchers believe, in the ballast water of cargo ships, and today its kind drifts in temperate and tropical seas around the world. A silent, world-spanning invasion of potentially ageless drifters, so small and so plain that the oceans absorbed them without anyone noticing. The most remarkable survivor on Earth traveled as a stowaway. Why does science care so much? Because locked inside this speck of jelly is a working demonstration of the thing medicine dreams about. Cells that can reset their identity, tissues that can rebuild rather than merely repair, a body that treats aging as a reversible state. Nobody serious is promising immortal humans, but understanding how Turritopsis cells pull off their transformation, how a committed, specialized cell steps backward into possibility, feeds directly into real research on regeneration and on how aging works at the cellular level. The tiniest drifter in the sea may be holding open a door that the entire field of medicine is trying to walk through. The ocean doesn't shout its greatest secrets. Sometimes it just lets them float by and waits to see if anyone's paying attention. If this one bent your brain, the next episode meets the deep's other great rule breaker, the shark that may live half a millennium. That video's on your screen right now, and the full series is linked in the description below. Subscribe to Primal Mysteries for new wildlife deep dives every week.